All right, so we got the bike off the one lift. We got the rears completed. Mike did the rears. Now I'm here with Joey.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Ohlins. And what are we gonna do now?
We're gonna do the front cartridge kit for your bike. It's known as an FKS 228. It is a NICS cartridge, meaning the rebound and compression are separated. Generally, we put the rebound on the right side, compression on the left side, but it is a fully adjustable cartridge kit where you have preload, rebound, and compression adjustability. But let's show you what's in the kit.
All right.
And then we'll tackle the bike and make it happen.
All right, man.
Okay, this is the, basically when we do a cartridge kit, we sell everything separately because somebody may be one weight and they may require one spring, and somebody at a different weight will obviously require a heavier rate spring. So we always sell the spring separately from the cartridge kit. So we're going to use an FKS 228 today. Springs, we're using an 8790-12. That's just a 12 Newton millimeter spring for this cartridge kit. And then we're going to use basically about 1.5 liters of our 1309-01 fork oil. It's highly recommended that you use our fork oil for our cartridge kits because that's what our valving is designed off of. It's basically our oil. So if you put somebody else's oil in there and the bike isn't working properly, well, we're not on a level playing ground, and using our oil puts us all on a level playing ground, so we know how the forks will work with the oil inside. So, opening up the box, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see your owner's manual, mounting instructions, some O-rings. The mounting instructions are very informative. I highly recommend reading them before you tackle the project, just so you know what you're going to be getting into. But follow the instructions. As long as you follow the instructions, you should be golden. If you don't follow the instructions, I've seen a lot of people not setting the oil level height correctly, and that will totally affect the quality of ride. Too much oil could lead to very harsh ride. Too little oil could lead to a very spongy, like it's just going to blow through the stroke. The amount of oil dictates your air gap, and that air gap is a secondary spring. And we'll go more into it once we're actually taking the forks apart and taking a look inside. So you got your owner's manual, mounting instructions, some O-rings for our fork caps, and then you have your actual cartridge kits. I'm going to show you a nifty trick too with these green bags, so keep these green bags. So you have, like I said before, one side controls rebound, one side controls compression, and it will not only state it on the top where it says COMP for compression, the other one will say rebound, or REB for rebound. But another way we determine that is where the bleed holes are on the actual cartridge kit. For compression, the bleed holes will be on the top, and then on the rebound cartridge, the bleed holes will be on the bottom. You can put the rebound on the left side, but we at Ohlins, it's always known that rebound right. Rebound will go in the right-hand leg. So, we got our two cartridge kits. Take these out of the bag. Then we have our spring box. Or then we have our 8790-12 springs. Let me get a razor. There we go. Also, when we're putting springs in, there's a laser etching on the top that states what rate your spring is. A good practice is that we always, when we put the springs in, we put the laser etching up. So if you needed to see what rate is in there, you can pop the fork cap off and say, oh, he's got 8790-12s in there. So it's just a practice that we do all the time as well. In this bag, let's go over here. These are your preload spacers. 2 of them you will use, 2 of them you will not. Depending on your weight and what spring you use, it will be listed on the back page of your mounting instructions on what preload spacers to use. For your scenario, we're dealing with a bike that has a fairing, and we're using the 8790-12, so they're telling us to use the 12mm length spacer, so the shorter one. So these longer spacers, we'll just get them out of the way so we don't get confused when we're doing the installation. All right, so now we have a general idea of what our cartridge kit, what comes inside the cartridge kit. Now we're gonna tackle the bike, start taking the forks off, showing you the shortcuts on how to get the forks off and so forth, and let's head that way. All right, so what the first thing we do is we get the bike lifted up towards the front. We just want to be able to spin the front wheel. Then we also tie the sides down so it's not going to go anywhere. Obviously, if you have a lift, it's a lot easier. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the front fender off. This is just a standard 1/4mm Allen. And you got these things glued on there. So let's go to this guy. Now I'm going to head towards the calipers. This is just a, it's a 10mm star point socket. Just let your calipers dangle down. Next, what I do is I break off the main axle nut. It is a 15/16 guy. I usually use a big impact, so let me grab that real quick. Pull that off. Then we come to a 6mm Allen for the axle pinch bolt. Now our wheel. So we remove our axle, slide it out, just kind of lift up on it. Front ABS sensor is on the left side. Hang with the caliper, lock the main axle, the spacer. Now we can remove the wheel. Now we have 6 more screws that we need to undo. We got 1 pinch bolt on the top, upper triple tree, and then we have 2 pinch bolts on the lower triple tree. I find that on the top, depending on the cover and the application, I take a quarter Allen wrench. I saw the top off, make it short, so that allows me to get to the upper one really easy. Now, the upper one's up underneath this cover, and you can feel it with your finger, and that's where I slipped this short quarter Allen up in there. And now there's going to be 2 more pinch bolts right down there. Once you undo those 2 pinch bolts, then the whole unit, the whole fork unit will just slide right out. There it is. Those 2 undone. The fork slides out. We'll usually find that they're pretty filthy up here because that's really hard to clean. We'll go ahead and grab the other one as well. There she comes. Fork number 2. Alright. Not everybody has this, but we have a vise that we attach to a motorcycle stand to kind of help us out. Okay. So this part it gets kind of tricky. So the OEM spring, they run a lot of preload on a pretty light rate spring. But what that means is when you undo this fork cap, it's going to want to punch you in the face. So to prevent that, what I do I take a rag. Get my, let's see, the size of this is going to be a 19 millimeter. Remember, all Harley suspension is made by Showa, so if you're dealing with anything on the shock or the fork, it's going to be metric, where then, you know, you got to swap back and forth. So this is a 19 mil up top. Take this rag, wrap it around, and I hold on to that. And if it works right, probably won't because I'm on film. Make sure I'm loosening it up, not tightening it. Okay, that's on there. Wrap this around. Hold on to it. Put some weight on it. There we go. Kind of retains the fork cap from punching you in the face. Ask me how I know. So we're gonna throw the stock fork cap, preload tube. We don't need that anymore. Remember I told you that trick about the holding on to these green bags? It's a pretty cool trick. Slip this on here. Try taking out the shock or the stock spring, oil is going to go everywhere. It's just natural. I came up with this idea that I put a bag on there. No mess. Got the old spring. Now what I'm going to do is dump out all the old fork fluid. Almost looks like transmission fluid. Now what we have to do is remove the OEM internals out of the fork. And the way we do that is, it's a 12 millimeter Allen and you need a pretty long one. What I did is I just took a 12 millimeter Allen that was an L shape, cut the head off, and then use a 12 mil socket. I'm going to do this with an impact. Hit it. If you're lucky, the screw will come right out. There we go. Let that drain. What I do is I cover this up, turn it upside down, all the stock stuff is going to come out. And what we are going to retain from this, the only thing we're going to retain from this is going to be the top out spring. It's very important. Do not forget to put the top out spring in. No bueno. What I do now is, depending on how many miles are on your bike, obviously this is a fairly new motorcycle. I can tell by the fluid that it's really clean. The fork seals aren't leaking. If you are wanting to replace your fork seals or bushings, now would be the time to do that. But I don't need to on this scenario because there's very low miles, I can tell, on these forks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to really clean out the upper tube, or the whole assembly. We use a product called Speed Solve, you know, brake clean, any type of degreaser. Just hosing it out. Slip it upside down, make sure there's nothing left. Drain. It's good. Back here on an angle. Take my top out spring. Good clean. Go ahead and pop that in. Top out, stock top out spring is the first thing I'm putting in. Now, let's see what fork we're dealing with. This is obviously the left-hand fork. Facing forward, you're going to have your caliper bolts going backwards. So we're going to put the compression side cartridge kit in this one. So I'm going to go over here. And the way we know it's compression, it will be marked on the top, COMP. going to do is I'm going to unscrew the fork cap, remove the yellow tag. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this nut all the way down to the bottom. Just screw it all the way down to the bottom. Now I'm going to pop this in. So we're taking our bolt. Also recommend putting a fresh crush washer on as well. Putting a little bit of Loctite. And you'll feel it catch the cartridge and just screw it until it stops.
I almost rode it over here because I I'm going to try mine. I got to shoot 6 hours.
Good snug. Alright, so now our cartridge kit is installed. I'm going to clean off the residue from the old fork fluid down here. And we're going to go back over here. Okay, so now we have our upper lower tube with the stock top out spring. Our cartridge kit has been installed, Loctited down at that bottom nut. Now what we're going to do is bring in our oil, 1309 oil. Generally I just fill it all the way to the top, right off the bat. Fill it up, and it's going to start doing some air bubbles because it's going to bleed. Usually put that on there so it doesn't splash me in the face. Put my hand on top, move this up and down. Start grabbing the damper rod, moving it up and down. You can see there's nothing right now, right? Because the cartridge kit's got air in it. This is very critical. We got to get rid of that air that's inside the cartridge kit. So we add more oil. I'll do it till I'm about 3 to 4 inches from the top. And then I'm going to grab this rod again. Since it's a compression side, I'm going to start to feel resistance when I push it down. And this is bleeding the cartridge kit. See that? Where before, if I would have let go, it just would have fell right down by itself. So I'm bleeding the cartridge kit, getting all the air out of this area, okay? So that feels really good. Nice resistance down on the compression side. Okay, this is the other part that I see people commonly fail on setting this correctly. The oil gap, the air gap, the amount of oil that's in there versus your air gap can make it or break it. If you do not measure the oil height successfully, you can either make it too harsh or you can make it too soft. From the mounting instructions, it's going to tell you that the oil level should be 140 millimeters. What that means is, with no spring in, just the cartridge kit, upper tube collapsed all the way down to the lower tube, I want an air gap from the top of this fork tube down to the oil of 140 millimeters. Now we have this nifty tool. You can make one with a syringe or anything. You just basically need a way of sucking the oil out. That gap right there from this clamp down to the bottom of the tube is 140 millimeters. So I'm going to stick it in here. I'm going to pull it until I hear air getting sucked out. So that tells me I'm at 140 millimeter air gap now. Okay, so we have our air gap set properly. Now it's time to insert our spring. Like I said, I always like to put the laser etching up top. Drop that in. Pretty simple. We've installed the spring. Next what we're going to do is we're going to take our fork cap. Remember those two O-rings that were sold packaged separately? We're going to take one of those O-rings, put it on the fork cap. I like to take a little bit of grease. Just a little bit of grease, put it on threads on that O-ring. Attach this tool to pull the damper rod back up. Put our preload spacer. I'm going to kind of hold that with one finger, take this off. I'm going to take our fork cap and I'm going to screw it down until it stops. And this is critical. This is why we screwed that one nut all the way down to the bottom, because this now seats this assembly onto the damper, and it needs to be seated in a proper position. That there's a little Allen up here that space will dictate how much it pushes on the main needle that leads down to the valley at the bottom. So now that that stops, now I'm going to continue to screw, and you're going to see that nut going up to the top, and then it stops right there. And then I'm going to get a 13 millimeter, put it on that nut. Then I'm going to grab a 14 millimeter. I always like to protect our cap. I put a little piece of paper towel on there. There we go. Just give it a good snug. That attaches the housing to the damper rod. And I'm going to leave this guy on here. Push this up and start screwing with. Here we go, the thread's caught. These fork caps, we just do them hand tight. You don't have to torque them down, anything crazy. Once they get clamped in the upper triple tree, they're not coming undone. So we just do them hand tight. And then, once that stops, you'll notice that the preload housing starts turning, okay? So, based on your weight, so obviously we're riding with the fairing on your bike. We use the 87-90-12, and with your weight, it's recommending 15 turns of preload. So 15 is the max turn of preloads. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this until it stops. And that'll be 15 mil of preload. All right, there we go. Now this is another important step. Now that we have the internals in, the oil height is set correctly, the spring is in, fork cap is installed, preload is installed, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 3 millimeter Allen, and this controls our rebound and compression. From the factory, it recommends on compression you start at 12 clicks. Rebound is also going to be at 12 clicks. Well, how do we know what 12 is? When they come from the factory, they're open completely up. They're completely counterclockwise. So what we're going to do is we're going to close it clockwise until it stops. That's considered 0, and you'll feel these like little indentations. That's what you're counting. So I'm at 0. Now I'm going to count back counterclockwise until I reach 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Don't forget to do this step, because it really sucks if you have them mounted in the bike and you're like, oh geez, I forgot to do the rebound and compression. You have to take them off just to get to them. So do that as a last step. And this fork is ready to be installed. I'm going to go ahead and do the rebound side, and then once we're done with that, then we'll install the forks back on the bike. Now you got these extensions here, so pop that out. Get a little bit of grease. That's
actually more blocked on this side. This side goes in so much more easier.
All right, man, looks like we got you good to go. We got your forks installed back on. Basically just the reverse order of taking the forks back off. But that's basically it, and we just finished it off with some pretty bitchin' stickers on the side, and I got your settings, rebound and compression, and preload to the factory settings. That's what we definitely recommend that you start off at.
Okay.
Man, go rip on it, man. It should be a totally different bike for sure.
We capped it off with some swing arm covers.
Yeah, for sure. We got these new swing arm covers that are pretty bitchin'. Add
cool.
a nice little touch of class.
Nice. And function. They're sealed. They'll keep the water
for
out
sure.
of there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because those caps, like you take the plastic cap off and there's just full of rust back there, and these new caps have a nice O-ring to seal them and prevent that rust from forming behind those little plastic covers.
All right. Well, listen. OhlinsUSA.com.
Yeah, for sure. OhlinsUSA.com. Check us out.
And thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, have fun.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Yeah.